Alec Flint looked down at his socks, trying to decide whether they were the sort of socks a super detective would wear. They were green with black stripes. Black straights were super detective color, as far as Alec was concerned. Green, not so much. But he liked it just the same. "Alec!" his father yelled up the stairs. "Almost ready," Alec yelled back. He slipped on his favorite green sweatshirt. It had a hood and a convenient pouch in the front where he could store things, like his hands if they get cold, or detective pins. Alec owned one really good detective pin that could wait even if you were holding it upside down. His mom got it for him when she went to Washington, D.C. a while back. Alec grabbed the pin off his desk and put it in the sweatshirt pouch. You never knew when you'd need a good detective pin. "Alec!" his father yelled again. "You don't want to miss the bus." But Alec didn't answer. He was too busy putting gel in his hair to make it spiky. Alec liked running his fingers back and forth over the hard spikes when he was thinking. It was like rubbing thoughts into his brain while he was spiking. He heard the phone ring. Then his dad yelled up the stairs once more. "Oh, the station just called. I had to head back over to the museum. You've got to come with me now." Oh, he was going to get to go in and fix your police business. "Coming," Alec yelled downstairs. Then he grabbed his backpack and crawled under his bed. Somehow his sneakers always ended up there, no matter where he remembered taking them off. Yep, there they were, black size 3 laces, still in double knot from the day before. Maybe his dad had stuck them under his bed while he was sleeping. Maybe his dad always stuck them under his bed while he was sleeping. Alec hadn't thought of that before, but it was possible. He might have to do a sneaker stakeout one night to see. That is, if no other more important super detective cases came along first. Alec slipped his feet into his sneakers and ran downstairs. He didn't make his bed. It was a deal he had with his dad when Miss Flint was away on business. And it was just the boys. No beds get made in the whole house, not even if guests came. When Alec got to the kitchen, his father handed him a baggie filled with chips, Captain Crunch cereal. It was Alec's favorite. He loved eating the Captain Crunches one by one, chewing them up as quickly and quietly as he could. He figured that's how he would have to eat when he was on a stakeout, quickly and quietly, so he practiced whenever he was able. Alec Flint and his father got into an unmarked vehicle. At least that's what Officer Flint called it. It was a car that the police department gave him, and it wasn't a patrol car with flashing lights or anything. He did have a little light on the inside you can stick on the roof if you had to speed to chase a probe. Her was what Officer Flint called a bad guy. Alec looked the word probe. He said it a few times in his head for fun. At the museum, Officer Flint and Alec walked through the big marble lobby they'd entered the day before. They'd been there because Officer Flint was supposed to guard the Christopher Columbus exhibit, which he'd done. Only Alec learned in the car. Once they left, a pup came and stole the entire thing. Alec followed behind his father, trying to walk quietly. Super detective always. Just did things quietly. At least that's what Alec figured. But unfortunately, the hard marble floors of the museum were not made for super detectives. Alec's sneakers squeaked and squealed and generally made a racket as he walked behind his father. While even looking down, Alec knew that Officer Flint was not wearing sneakers. He was wearing his black shoes with the bottoms that clipped as he walked. You could tell a lot about people by the way their shoes sounded, Alec thought. His father's shoes sounded serious. His own shoes sounded noisy and kid-like. Not the best sound for a stupid detective. Maybe he could get his dad to buy him some new shoes. As Alec squeaked down the hallway, trying to make his sneakers sound detective, he heard a third pair of shoes. These shoes swish-swash on the ground. They sounded sneaky, and not like sneaker sneaky, like plain old sneaky. Alec couldn't even tell how close they were. Swish, 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 pop. A security guard popped up out of nowhere, right next to Officer Flint. Alec absorbed him. His name tag said Fernando, though he said to call him Frank, and he had come to escort Officer Flint to the room that formerly had the Christopher Columbus exhibit. Really pity, Fernando said, and then started tugging on his collar. Warm in this place, no? Alec's hands were shoved into his useful sweatshirt pocket. Not to me, he said. Fernando called me freak. Gave him a look. Alec didn't even have to be a detective to know what that kind of look meant. Fernando did not like Alec Flint, and Alec Flint, he did not like Fernando. Once they got to the exhibit room, Officer Flint and Alec were greeted by Dr. Glumsfield, the creator of the American History Museum. Alec knew from his father that Dr. Glumsfield was supposed to be very smart, and he was good at making rich people give money to the museum, which, according to Officer Flint, was very poor. In fact, Dr. Glumsfield had told them yesterday that one of the rich people donated the whole Christopher Columbus exhibit from his own personal collection of artifacts. Only Dr. Glumsfield didn't call the guy a rich person. He called him an anonymous benefactor, which Officer Flint said really meant a rich guy who didn't want anyone to know who he was. Alec Flint thought that was funny. If he were a rich guy and gave a whole entire exhibit to a museum, he'd want his name hanging on the door in big letters, preferably green. But then again, maybe the rich guy was a secret detective, in which case, Alec understood. Detectives had to keep a low profile. It was part of their job. Dr. Glumsfield had the annoying habit of always using long words that Alec didn't understand, like apostrophe and prosperity. It made it very hard for Alec to figure out what he was talking about. He'd had the same problem yesterday. Oh, Officer Flint, Dr. Glumsfield said, walking very quietly to Alec's dad's side. His feet were swish-swash too, kind of like Fernando. Call me Franks. You wouldn't believe what happened. The sound that swirled from those alarm bells really was just too much. It made me quite oppressive. I hope we can count on your prosperity in this matter, and that you'll find the thief instantly. Officer Flint rolled his eyes at Alec. They had laughed about Dr. Glumsfield the night before at dinner. Alec's dad saying things like, "Alexander, may I have another survey?" instead of, "Hey, can you pass me a napkin?" Alec tried to with, "May I please have some carboned beverage?" But Officer Flint said, "Nice try, buddy." Soda was not allowed in the Flint house, except on special occasions, and regularly old Sunday night was not a special occasion. While Alec's dad spoke to Dr. field. Alec wandered off and retraced the route he'd taken through the museum the day before. Only now he had to remember what the exhibit used to look like. To see what wasn't there, that would be the tricky part. Yesterday he could just open his eyes and look at the different artifacts. Now he could only imagine. Alec closed his eyes and webbed thoughts into his brain. Yesterday the room had been packed. Alec Flint hadn't been able to look anywhere else in a huge glass case filled with books or whipped-off displays of cutlasses and bronze swords. They had been chests and boxes that looked like they belonged in a pirate story, and glass containers that had a big pile of gold coins. Alec kept rubbing his head to remember more about the exhibit. He had looked at the gold coins for a long time yesterday, and that they must have been worth $3,000 or maybe $1 million. Alec wasn't sure how gold or other jewelry stuff cost, since he never bought any. The only jewelry he wore was the detective watch his mom got him the last time she went to San Francisco. It had buttons that lets you set 3 different time zones and a stopwatch, and it was glow in the dark but detective watches weren't really jewelry as far as Alec was concerned. And they certainly weren't made of gold. They were only sort of jewelry. The kind that was okay for a boy to wear without feeling girly. Alec opened his eyes and checked his detective watch. Still 20 minutes until school started. Alec read the plaque on the wall next to the case where the gold coins used to be. The prop hadn't taken the plaque. It said, "These coins are part of the treasure Christopher Columbus brought on the Nina during his first voyage to America. Columbus planned on trading them for goods and the Indians." Officer Flint was still talking to Dr. Glimsfield. Alec checked, so he kept wandering around the empty exhibit. He remembered yesterday he'd walked around with Emily Burge. She was there because her dad, Alfred Burge, was in charge of the insurance company in Lower Hollows. As far as Alec knew, that meant if expensive things got stolen, Alec Flint had to find them fast. Otherwise, Emily's dad's company had to pay big bucks to whoever lost them. In this case, it would be the anonymous benefactor. Officer Flint got invited to things like the Christopher Columbus exhibit to keep an eye on what was happening. Alfred Burge was not invited, but came anyway. Emily Burge was bouncy. She was also Alec's next-door neighbor, and in his same class at school. Alec Flint had been looking at the gold coins when Emily Squeal bounced over to him and said, "Hey, Alec, isn't this stuff cool?" Yeah, Alec had said, totally. It wasn't that Alec didn't like Emily. He liked her tons more than he liked Fernando, the creepy security guard, for example. But sometimes he wished she would stop bouncing for a while. Even talking to her made him a little tired. "I love going to museums like this, don't you? Alec, don't you?" she had said, bouncing. Alec didn't like going to museums like this, especially when the exhibits were on the FBI or old TV shows where people were police cars partners. There was one exhibit he and his dad saw that was all about the old TV show named Car 54. Where are you? Alec liked how officers today and Officer Menden got to be detectives together, like a team, Alec thought, as he had on many occasions before, that it would be nice to find someone to be a detective team with him, but not Emily Burge. As far as Alec was concerned, Emily Burge would make a terrible detective. She wouldn't be quiet long enough to go on a stakeout or anything. "I'm looking for my dad today, Emily." he'd said to her yesterday. I can't really talk. Oh, Emily said, her eyes wide. Got it. Then she zipped her lips, actually slipped them all the way across with her fingers, and marched to Alec's surprise, stood quietly next to him while he examined the exhibit and watched for pearls. After the gold, Alec had checked out a bag-leathered bound book in his glass case. He'd stood on his sneaker toes to see inside. The front cover hadn't said anything. It was just sort of brown and leathery. It had looked like someone made it out of an old worn shoe. Alec closed his eyes and rubbed some more thoughts into his brain so he could remember what the book was like when it was actually there. But he couldn't think of anything else, other than the shoe thing. So he opened his eyes and looked at the plaque that was still on the wall. It said, Captain's Log of Christopher Columbus. And since you couldn't see inside the book, even before it had gone missing, because it was locked in the case, there were pictures stacked on the wall of what was inside. Alec glanced at the pictures, which were mostly just round, curly handwriting in another language, and kept going. He checked his watch again. Officer Flint was still talking to Dr. Glimsfield, and there were 15 minutes left until Alec had to get to school. On the side of the next empty case, Alec read from a plaque that said part of the pirate Pinta's sail. The air conditioner box was still there, where the piece of Pinta's sail had been stored so it wouldn't rot, but the fabric was gone. Alec wondered who had found the sail select and where the rest of the Pinta was. Maybe rotting somewhere at the bottom of the ocean. Alec secretly hoped so. He was not a fan of Christopher Columbus or his ships. Alec moved on from the empty air-conditioned box to the empty stand where yesterday he and Emily had looked through the telescope that one of Columbus' men used to spy land. It hadn't been all locked up, and you could actually touch it. Yesterday, Alec had slid the wooden telescope in and out, making it larger and shorter. When he looked through the lenses, he'd seen Emily's eye up close. Can I try? She'd asked. Sure, Alec said. After he handed it over, Emily had put one hand on the hip and twirled the telescope around like a baton in the other hand. Then she'd drop it. The clatter had echoed through the big room. Alec had bent to pick up the telescope and had given it back to Emily. Good thing the piece you took through didn't break. You looked through didn't break, he said, slightly worried that it wouldn't be shady characters who were in the Christopher Columbus exhibit, but it would be Emily Burge. After the clatter, Dr. Glimsfield had swish-washed over and appeared next to Alec and Emily. I think it would be a wonderful idea if the two of you returned to your fathers, he'd said, and looked hard at Alec. Emily Burge had sticked out her tongue behind Dr. Glimsfield's back. Alec had not stuck out his tongue. He'd had the notion that Dr. Glimsfield's idea was more an order than a suggestion, and wanted to get away from him as quickly as possible. Alec had screamed back to his father. Emily had screamed bounced back to hers. And that's what Alex Flint did again, because he realized that according to his detective watch, he only had 4 minutes to get to school before the bell. But Dad, he whispered loudly to Officer Flint. School. Officer Flint looked at his watch and his eyes popped open very wide. Creepers, he said, which Alec Flint knew meant his dad thought they were in trouble. He only said creepers when things got bad. Dr. Glimsfield, Officer Flint said, "I'll be right back. Just have to take my son to school. If you fill out this missing identifier, I'll be back to go over it with you in a jiff." "Of course," Dr. Glimsfield said. Fernando Flake escorted Alec and Officer Flint out of the museum. Alec sprayed on him as they walked. It looked like there was a bulge in the back of his pocket. A bulge the size of a gold coin. Alec looked over at his dad, but Officer Flint wasn't paying attention to Fernando. Alec saw Alec. This might be a case for a super detective. He pulled his detective notebook out of his pocket and his pen out of his convenient sweatshirt pouch. Then Alec Flint began to write.